The first time my daughter-in-law told me the baby wasn't mine to touch, the room went so quiet I could hear the oxygen hiss behind the crib. I remember standing there with my hands folded together, knuckles white, pretending I was fine. Hospitals have a way of teaching you how to stand still without making a sound, how to swallow words before they spill. The baby lay wrapped in a blanket the color of fresh milk, his little chest rising and falling like he was learning the rhythm of the world. My grandson. My son's son. And yet I stood there like a stranger at a bus stop, watching him leave without me. Please, I said softly, because softness has always been my first language. Just for a moment. She didn't look at me. She adjusted the blanket instead, tucked it tighter around the baby's chin, and said it again, calm, measured, almost rehearsed. He's not yours to touch. The words landed wrong. Not loud, not sharp, just wrong. Like a hymn sung half a note off. I smiled the way women my age learn to smile when something hurts, but there's nowhere to put the hurt. My son stood at the foot of the bed, eyes rimmed red from 2 sleepless nights, hands shoved into his pockets as if he'd misplaced himself. The nurse hovered nearby, clipboard pressed to her chest, glancing between us like she could sense the tension, but didn't know where to place it. I told myself it was exhaustion. Childbirth drains a woman down to her bones. New mothers are protective. New families are fragile. I told myself a lot of things in that moment, anything but the truth. Because the truth, if I'd let it in right then, would have cracked me open. Before all of this, my life was simple in the way routines can be simple, not empty, just familiar. I lived in a small yellow house with a maple tree out front that dropped its leaves like it was shedding secrets every fall. I worked part-time at the library, shelving books in the morning's end. Reading in the afternoons when the light slanted just right through the windows. On Sundays, I cooked. That's how my family knows me, through casseroles and stews, through the smell of onions softening in butter. My son, Daniel, is my only child. I raised him after his father passed when Daniel was 8, heart attack, sudden, cruel. We learned to move through life together, quietly, steadily. Daniel grew into a good man. The kind who calls when he's running late. The kind who holds doors and remembers birthdays. When he brought Lena home 3 years ago, I welcomed her the way I welcome everyone, with open hands and an open table. Lena was polite in the beginning. Reserved, but polite. She spoke carefully, like she was always editing herself. She kept her hair pulled back tight and her clothes neat, as if wrinkles offended her. We never fought. We never raised our voices. But there was a distance there, thin as glass, always between us. When they told me they were expecting, Daniel's voice cracked on the phone. I sat down right there on the kitchen floor and cried into the tile. A grandbaby felt like a promise of continuity, of laughter returning to rooms that had grown quiet. I knitted a blanket in pale blue, my fingers remembering patterns my mother taught me decades ago. I washed baby clothes in unscented soap and folded them into neat stacks, imagining a tiny body filling them. Lena accepted the gifts with a smile that never reached her eyes. Thank you, she said. Always thank you. Never more. The pregnancy was distant. Appointments I wasn't invited to. Updates that came late, filtered through Daniel. When I asked questions, Lena answered politely but briefly, like she was checking boxes. I noticed it, yes. But I told myself not to read into things. I told myself this wasn't about me. The day the baby was born, Daniel called at dawn. It's a boy, he said, breathless. Mom, he's perfect. I drove to the hospital with my hands shaking on the steering wheel, rehearsing what I'd say, how I'd be calm, how I wouldn't overwhelm. I carried the blanket folded neatly in a gift bag, the yarn soft as clouds under my fingers. That's when Lena told me no. She said it gently. That was the strange part. Not cruel, not angry. Gentle. As if she were explaining a rule I'd missed. He's very sensitive right now, she said. We're limiting contact. Limiting. Such a clean word. Such a sharp edge. I nodded. I sat. I waited. Hours passed in that room. Machines beeping, nurses coming and going, daylight thinning into evening. Other family members came, held the baby, took pictures. I stayed in my chair, hands folded, smile fixed. Each time I leaned forward, Lena's body shifted, subtle, protective, blocking the path like a door closing slowly. By the third refusal, something inside me went cold. I caught the nurse's eye once, just for a second. She looked away quickly, then back again, her mouth tightening. I told myself it meant nothing. Nurses see everything. They don't get involved. I left the hospital that night without holding my grandson. The blanket stayed folded in the bag untouched. At home, I placed it on the back of a chair and stared at it until the room blurred. The house smelled like the soup I'd left warming on the stove, now overcooked, onions gone sweet and sad. I turned it off and sat at the table in the quiet, listening to the clock tick like it was counting something down. I slept poorly, dreams full of closed doors and muffled cries. The next morning, Daniel called. He sounded tired but happy. "She's doing great," he said. "We'll bring him home tomorrow." "Of course," I replied. "Take your time." I hung up and stood at the sink, watching water run over my hands. I told myself patience was a virtue. I told myself I'd wait. But there are moments, small, ordinary moments, when life tilts just enough to show you the edge of something sharp. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. That moment came later that afternoon, when my phone rang again. It was the hospital. And the nurse's voice on the other end was careful, too careful. "Mrs. Harris," she said, "I just wanted to clarify something about the chart." My heart began to beat in my ears. "Of course," I said. "What is it?" There was a pause. Papers rustled. Then she said a sentence so small, so offhand, that it nearly slipped past me. "Given the situation with the adoption paperwork." I gripped the edge of the counter. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "The what?" The silence that followed was not empty. It was full. The nurse inhaled, and I could hear the decision forming in her chest before she spoke again. I may have misspoken," she said. Her voice softened, professional walls sliding back into place. "Let me transfer you." "No," I said, still quiet, but steadier than I felt. "Please." "You didn't misspeak. You said paperwork. Adoption paperwork." Another pause. Longer this time. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor chimed. The sound threaded itself through the silence like a needle. "I can't discuss patient details," she finally said. "But I assumed, given the restrictions, I assumed you were already aware." "Aware of what, exactly?" "That my daughter-in-law had built a fence around my grandson? That I wasn't allowed to hold him? Or something far heavier, something with signatures and dates and a truth that didn't belong to me at all?" "I'm his grandmother," I said, the word tasting strange now. "If there's paperwork that concerns my family, I think I deserve to know what kind." She didn't answer right away. When she did, her tone had changed, less official, more human. "I'm sorry," she said. "I truly am. I should let the charge nurse call you back." The line went dead. I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, listening to nothing. The kitchen clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, the maple tree stirred, leaves whispering like they were sharing news I hadn't earned yet. Adoption. The word rattled around my head, bumping into memories and questions and a sudden, nauseating fear. Lena had been pregnant. I'd seen her belly grow. I'd felt the baby kick once, just once, under my palm, when Daniel wasn't in the room and she'd seemed momentarily distracted. So what kind of adoption paperwork could possibly? Unless. I sat down slowly, the chair legs scraping the floor too loud in the quiet house. I thought of Lena's careful answers. The way she'd corrected Daniel when he said, "our baby," saying "the baby" instead. The way she'd kept him close to her chest in the hospital, like she was guarding more than just a fragile newborn. And the way she'd looked at me, not with anger, not with fear, but with calculation. Daniel called that evening. I answered on the first ring. "Mom," he said, cheerful, tired. "We're home. He's asleep already." "That's good," I replied. "Babies should sleep." There was a pause, brief but noticeable. "Is everything okay?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I just wanted to ask you something." "Sure. Did you and Lena complete any paperwork recently? Hospital forms. Legal forms." He laughed lightly. "There's a ton of paperwork with a newborn." "Why? Anything about guardianship?" I asked. "Or "Mom," he said, and now there was caution in his voice. "What's going on?" "I received a call from the hospital today," I said. I kept my voice even. "A nurse mentioned adoption paperwork." Silence. Not the kind where someone is thinking. The kind where someone is choosing. "That's nothing," he finally said. "Probably a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," I echoed. "Daniel, are you planning to adopt your own son?" He exhaled sharply. "You're reading too much into it." "Then explain it to me," I said. "Please." "I can't get into it right now," he said. "Lena's resting." "The babies." "Daniel," I said, firmer now. "I'm your mother. I'm not asking to interfere. I'm asking to understand." Another pause. Then, quietly, "Let me call you tomorrow." He hung up before I could respond. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, tracing the cracks with my eyes like constellations. I replayed every interaction with Lena, every moment I'd brushed aside a feeling because it felt impolite to name it. I wondered what kind of truth requires silence to survive. The next morning, I drove to Daniel's house unannounced. I brought muffins, blueberry, his favorite, because old habits die hard. The house smelled like antiseptic wipes and something sour underneath, like fear left out too long. Lena answered the door. She looked tired, but composed. The baby cried somewhere upstairs. "I didn't know you were coming," she said. "I called," I replied. "You didn't answer." She stepped aside reluctantly. I entered, setting the muffins on the counter. "How's the baby?" I asked. "Asleep," she said. "Daniel's in the shower." I nodded. "Lena," I said, turning to face her fully. "A nurse called me yesterday." Her eyes flickered. "Just once. But it was enough. She mentioned adoption paperwork," I continued. "I want you to tell me why." She crossed her arms, shoulders stiffening. "That's not your business. He's my grandson." She shook her head. "No, he's not." The words landed harder than any slap. "What do you mean?" I asked. She took a breath, slow and deliberate. "I mean biologically, he's not Daniel's." The room tilted. "He's yours," she went on, her voice steadier now that the truth was out. "Mine, but not his." I stared at her, my mind struggling to keep up. "Then whose?" "That doesn't matter," she said quickly. "Daniel loves him. He wants to be his father. The adoption makes it legal." "And Daniel knows?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "He's known since before the birth." My chest tightened. "Then why hide it from me?" Her gaze hardened. "Because you judge. Because you meddle. Because I didn't want you to look at him and see someone else's mistake." I thought of the way she'd shielded the baby from my arms. Not because he was fragile, but because the lie was. "And the hospital?" I asked. "Why not tell them to keep quiet?" Her lips pressed together. I thought they would. The front door opened. Daniel stepped in, towel around his neck, hair damp. He stopped short when he saw us facing each other, tension thick as fog. "Mom," he said, "what are you doing here?" "I came to understand," I replied. "And I think I have." He looked at Lena. She didn't look back. "Is it true?" I asked him. "Are you adopting him?" Daniel's shoulders sagged. "Yes," he said. "We didn't want to make it a thing." "A thing," I repeated softly. "You made it a wall." He rubbed his face with both hands. "I didn't want you to think less of her. Or of the baby." I stepped closer, my voice breaking despite my effort to keep it calm. "I would never think less of a child," I said. "And I raised you better than to believe that." Lena turned away, blinking rapidly. "That's why she wouldn't let me hold him," I said. "Because she was afraid I'd see the truth." Daniel nodded slowly. "She was scared," he said. "We both were." The baby cried upstairs, sharp and sudden, slicing through the room. Instinct moved me before thought. I took a step toward the stairs. Lena blocked my path. "Please," she said. "Not yet." I stopped. In that moment, I understood something painful and clear. This wasn't just about blood or names. It was about control. About fear. About a lie that had grown too large to manage quietly. "I won't expose you," I said finally. "But I won't be kept out either." Daniel looked at me, eyes wet. "Mom." "I need time," I said. "All of us do." I turned and left, muffins untouched, the sound of my footsteps echoing louder than I wanted. Outside, the air was cold and bright. I sat in my car, hands shaking on the steering wheel, and realized the hardest part wasn't the secret. It was knowing how long it had been kept from me and why. I drove home without turning on the radio. Silence felt safer than music, less likely to unravel me at the seams. Every stoplight seemed longer than usual, every pedestrian too close, as if the world had decided to test how carefully I could carry a truth that didn't belong entirely to me. At home, I set my purse down and leaned against the kitchen counter, breathing through the tightness in my chest. The house looked the same as it always had, the maple tree shadow stretching across the floor, the blanket still folded over the chair. But something fundamental had shifted. Like discovering a crack in a wall you've passed every day without noticing. I told myself not to act in anger. Anger makes mistakes louder. So I made tea. I washed the mug twice even though it was already clean. I stood at the window and watched a neighbor rake leaves into neat piles, the scrape of metal on concrete grounding me in something ordinary. The phone rang just after dusk. It was Daniel. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. His voice was raw, stripped of the careful tone he used when he wanted to keep things smooth. "We should have told you sooner." "Yes," I said. "You should have." A long breath on the other end. "Lena's terrified," he continued. "She's afraid you'll tell people. That I'll shame her?" I finished gently. "Daniel, I've lived long enough to know that secrets grow fangs when you lock them away. I'm not the danger here." "I know," he said. "I do. But she's still recovering. Everything feels fragile." "I understand fragility," I replied. "I also understand boundaries. And being shut out isn't the same as being asked for patience." He was quiet for a moment. "Then, can we talk tomorrow? All three of us?" "Yes," I said. "We can." When I hung up, I felt something settle, not peace exactly, but resolve. If this family was going to survive this, the truth needed air. Not gossip. Not judgment. Just honesty, spoken plainly, like setting a bone that had been broken too long. The next afternoon, I returned to their house. No muffins this time. No offerings meant to soften the edges. I came empty-handed, which felt honest. Lena sat on the couch with the baby asleep against her chest, his tiny fist curled into her shirt. Daniel sat beside her, one arm draped along the back of the couch like he was trying to hold them both together. I took the chair across from them. "I'm not here to argue," I began. "I'm here to listen. And then I'm going to say my piece." Lena nodded, eyes tired. "Okay." She went first. She talked about fear, how she'd been young and lonely when she got pregnant, how the baby's biological father had vanished as soon as responsibility showed its teeth. How Daniel had chosen to stay, not out of obligation but love. "I was afraid," she admitted, staring at the baby's blanket. "Afraid you'd see him and see everything I did wrong. And I was afraid," Daniel added, "that telling you would change how you looked at us." At him. I listened without interrupting. I listened because it mattered. Because they were telling the truth now, and truth deserves patience. When they finished, I folded my hands in my lap, the way I always do before saying something that can't be unsaid. "You took away my choice," I said quietly. "You decided who I would be without asking me." Lena looked up, startled. "You decided I would judge. That I would reject. That I would hurt a child because of how he came into the world," I continued. "That's not who I am. And it's not who I raised my son to be." Tears slipped down Lena's cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. "I didn't mean to," she whispered. "I just didn't know how to let you in." I leaned forward. "You let people in by telling them the truth. Even when it's messy. Especially then." The baby stirred, making a small, sighing sound that softened the room. I watched his face, so new, so unmarked by any of this, and felt the ache return, sharp and familiar. "I won't tell your secret," I said. "Not because I was asked to keep quiet, but because it's yours to tell when you're ready. But I won't be kept at arm's length either." Daniel nodded. "We don't want that." "Then we need rules," I said. "Clear ones." Lena straightened. "What kind of rules?" "No lies," I said. "No whispering around me. And no using the baby as a shield." Her grip tightened slightly on the blanket. "I didn't." "I know," I said gently. "But that's what it felt like." Silence settled again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It felt like space being made. Can I hold him now? I asked. Lena hesitated. The paws stretched thin and fragile. Then she nodded slowly and shifted the baby toward me. When his weight settled into my arms, something in me unlocked. He was warmer than I expected, heavier too, solid and real and alive. His eyelashes brushed his cheeks when he blinked, and his breath puffed softly against my wrist. For a moment, no one spoke. I was afraid, Lena said quietly, that you'd feel different once you held him. I looked down at his tiny face. I do feel different, I said. I feel like his grandmother. Daniel let out a shaky laugh that sounded more like a sob. We didn't fix everything that day. Healing rarely happens all at once. But something important shifted. The lie loosened its grip. The walls came down an inch at a time. Over the next weeks, the truth stayed where it belonged, inside the family. There were hard conversations. Awkward silences. Moments where Lena watched me closely, still learning what my love looked like when it wasn't filtered through fear. I showed up. I held the baby. I didn't ask questions about biology. I asked about feeding schedules and sleep and whether he liked being rocked or bounced. Love, I've learned, is often practical. The public reckoning came later, when extended family noticed timelines that didn't quite line up. When questions surfaced at a birthday dinner, whispered between cousins. Lena froze, panic flashing across her face. I spoke up before she could spiral. Families are built in different ways, I said calmly, meeting curious eyes. What matters is how we choose each other. The room quieted. No one pushed further. Lena looked at me then, not with suspicion, not with fear, but with something new. Trust. That night, after everyone left, she hugged me for the first time without stiffening. Thank you, she whispered. I held her back. We're learning, I said. All of us. Later, alone in my kitchen, I unfolded the pale blue blanket and laid it across my lap. It fit him perfectly. Some truths don't destroy families. Some truths save them. The weeks that followed taught me something I hadn't expected, that healing doesn't arrive with a grand announcement. It slips in quietly, disguised as routine. It looked like Lena texting me at 2 a.m. because the baby wouldn't stop crying and Daniel was pacing the hallway with dark circles under his eyes. It sounded like her voice, shaky but honest, asking, "Is this normal?" It felt like the weight of my grandson in my arms while Lena watched from the doorway, arms crossed, not guarding anymore, just learning. I didn't rush her. Trust, once cracked, doesn't respond well to pressure. It responds to consistency. I came by twice a week. Sometimes I cooked. Sometimes I just folded laundry while Lena showered in peace. I talked to the baby like I'd talked to Daniel when he was small, soft nonsense words mixed with real ones, because I always believed babies understood more than we gave them credit for. Still, not everything was smooth. One afternoon, while I was rocking the baby near the window, Lena hovered behind me. I could feel her presence without turning around, the way you feel a storm before it breaks. "You're holding him like Daniel," she said. I glanced up at her reflection in the glass. "Is that okay?" She nodded, but her hands twisted together. "I'm scared I'll lose him." The words caught me off guard. "Lose him how?" "To you," she admitted. "To your family." "To the truth." I shifted the baby gently, waiting until he settled again. "Love isn't a competition," I said. "And truth doesn't steal children. Fear does." She swallowed hard. "I don't want him to grow up confused." "Then don't confuse him," I replied. "Let him grow up surrounded by honesty, not silence." That was the first time she didn't argue. She sat down across from me, exhaustion etched into her face, and said something I hadn't expected. "I don't know how to be a good mother," she whispered. I remembered being young, widowed, terrified, holding an 8-year-old boy who needed answers I didn't have. "None of us do," I said. "We learn by staying." Something softened in her then. Not completely, but enough. The real test came when Daniel's sister, my niece, visited from out of state. She noticed the baby's features immediately, commented on them casually, the way people do when they think they're being helpful. "He doesn't look like Daniel much," she said, smiling. Lena went pale. The room held its breath. I didn't look at Lena. I looked straight at my niece and said evenly, "Babies surprise us. That's half the joy." The conversation moved on. But later, in the kitchen, Lena pressed her hands to the counter and started crying. Not loud, not dramatic. Just tears slipping down, unstoppable. "I thought I was going to faint," she said. I handed her a towel. "You don't have to live like this forever." She wiped her face. "What if people hate me when they find out?" "Some might," I said honestly. "But the people who matter won't." That night, after they put the baby down, Daniel asked me to stay. "I don't know how to fix this," he said, staring at the floor. "I feel like I failed both of you." "You didn't," I told him. "You chose love. You just tried to protect it with secrecy instead of truth." He nodded slowly. "What would you do?" I thought about it for a long moment. "I'd stop hiding, little by little. I'd decide who deserves the truth, and I'd tell it before it gets told for you." Lena listened from the doorway, quiet. A month later, they told Daniel's parents-in-law, then a close friend. Not with announcements, not with explanations, just honesty, delivered calmly. Some reactions were awkward. One was unkind. But nothing shattered. The world didn't end. What surprised Lena most was that the baby didn't change. He laughed. He grew. He learned how to hold onto fingers with shocking strength. Truth didn't hurt him. Fear had. The day Daniel finalized the adoption, they asked me to come with them. The courthouse smelled like old paper and coffee. The judge smiled kindly and spoke about commitment, about choosing to be a parent every day. When it was done, Daniel hugged Lena so tightly I thought she might disappear into him. On the steps outside, Lena turned to me. "You could have exposed us," she said quietly. "You could have made this so much worse." Yes, I agreed. I could have. Why didn't you? I looked at the baby asleep in his carrier, lips parted slightly like he was dreaming of something good. "Because secrets punish children first," I said. "And I won't be part of that." She nodded, tears brimming again, but these were different. These were release. The last barrier fell a few weeks later on an ordinary afternoon. Lena handed me the baby without hesitation and said, "I trust you." Not as a test, as a fact. That night, alone in my living room, I rocked my grandson while the clock ticked steadily in the background. I thought about how close I'd come to losing them, not because of the secret, but because of the fear wrapped around it. Families break when silence replaces love. They heal when truth is handled gently. By the time autumn settled in, the house felt different. Not quieter, babies don't allow for that, but warmer, like a place where laughter had learned how to live alongside uncertainty. Leaves piled up along the sidewalk outside Daniel and Lena's home, and I found myself visiting more often than I planned, staying longer than I announced. Lena didn't flinch anymore when I reached for the baby. She handed him over the way mothers do when trust has finally taken root, without explanation, without watching too closely. Sometimes she'd disappear into the bedroom to nap, leaving me alone with him, the soft hum of the baby monitor keeping us company. One afternoon, as I rocked him gently, Lena sat across from me, her knees pulled up under her chin. "I still think about that day in the hospital," she said suddenly. "The way I talked to you." I kept my eyes on the baby's face. "So do I." "I was cruel," she whispered. "I didn't mean to be, but I was." "You were afraid," I replied. Fear often borrows cruelty's voice. She nodded slowly. "I thought if I controlled everything, who touched him, who knew what, I could keep the truth from ruining us." "And now?" I asked. "And now I know control almost did," she said. That honesty mattered. Not because it erased the pain, but because it named it. The real public reckoning came unexpectedly, at a family gathering I almost didn't attend. Daniel's aunt was turning 70, and the celebration spilled into a community hall filled with long tables, paper plates, and voices layered thick with history. I watched Lena carefully that day. She held the baby close, yes, but not defensively. More like a mother who finally believed she belonged in the room. Halfway through the afternoon, a cousin, too curious for her own good, cornered Daniel near the punch bowl. "So," she said brightly, "whose eyes did the baby get?" "Because they're definitely not yours." Daniel froze. Before he could respond, Lena stepped forward. "They're mine," she said evenly. The cousin laughed awkwardly. "Oh, I just meant—" "I know what you meant," Lena replied, her voice steady but kind. "And it's okay to wonder. But we're not answering questions about biology today." The room went still. Heads turned. The moment balanced on a knife's edge. I felt my chest tighten, but also something else. Pride. The cousin flushed, muttered an apology, and moved on. The conversation shifted. Life continued. Later, Lena found me near the dessert table. Her hands were shaking. "I didn't plan to say that," she admitted. "It just came out." "You did exactly right," I told her. "You told the truth without telling the whole story." She exhaled. "I learned that from you." That night, when I got home, I sat alone at my kitchen table and cried, not from sadness, but from release. From watching a woman reclaim her dignity after believing she'd lost it. The baby grew quickly. His laughter came in bursts, unexpected and bright. Daniel sent me videos while I was at work, first smiles, first attempts at rolling over, first time gripping his father's finger like he'd never let go. One evening, as I helped Lena bathe him, she said something that caught me off guard. "I want him to know someday," she said. "Everything. When the time is right," I agreed. "I don't want him to think love is conditional," she continued, "or that truth is dangerous." I met her gaze. "Then you're already a better mother than you think." She smiled faintly. "You don't hate me anymore, do you?" I rinsed the soap from the baby's tiny arm. "I never hated you," I said. "I hated the wall." She nodded, understanding settling between us like something earned. The final shift came quietly. One afternoon, while Lena napped and Daniel was at work, I held my grandson and thought about how close I'd come to walking away. How easy it would have been to let pride harden into distance. How tempting it had been to expose the truth out of hurt instead of care. I imagined the version of myself who did that. She would have been right, but she would have been alone. Love, I realized, isn't proven by being right. It's proven by what you protect. When Lena woke, she found me in the living room, the baby asleep on my chest. "You look peaceful," she said. "I feel grateful," I replied. "For what?" "For the chance to choose love when it would have been easier not to." She sat beside me, resting her hand lightly on the baby's back. For the first time, it didn't feel like a negotiation. It felt like family. I drove home that evening under a sky streaked with pink and gold, thinking about how secrets test us, not to see if we can keep them, but to see if we can carry them without letting them poison the people we love. And I knew then that we had crossed the hardest part. Not because the truth was gone, but because fear no longer owned it. Winter arrived gently that year, the way it does when the world seems to understand that people are still mending. The first frost clung to the edges of sidewalks, thin and silver, and the baby, now sturdier, louder, wonderfully alive, began to recognize faces. Mine, especially. He smiled when he saw me. Not the polite, unfocused smile babies give to anyone with a warm voice, but a deliberate one. A recognition. As if something in him already knew where I fit. Lena noticed it too. "He knows you," she said one afternoon, watching from the kitchen doorway as he kicked his feet in my arms. "He really knows you." I smiled. "Babies are better judges of character than adults." She laughed softly. It still surprised me when she laughed around me, like we'd crossed into a country neither of us expected to visit. But healing, I learned, is not a straight line. It bends. Sometimes it doubles back. The setback came in the form of a letter. Daniel brought it to me one evening, his face tight with worry. "This came for you," he said. From Lena's past. I took the envelope slowly. No return address. Just my name, written carefully. Inside was a short note. No greeting. No apology. "I know about the baby. He deserves to know who his real father is." My hands trembled as I read it again. And again. "Who sent this?" I asked. Daniel shook his head. "Lena won't say. But I know who it is." The air felt heavy, thick with something old and dangerous. "Does he plan to?" "I don't know," Daniel said. "But Lena's terrified." That night, we sat around the kitchen table, Lena, Daniel, and me, the baby asleep in his carrier nearby. The letter lay between us like a quiet threat. "I didn't want you to ever be dragged into this," Lena said, her voice shaking. I thought if I buried it deep enough, it would stay buried. Secrets don't stay buried, I said gently. They wait. What if he tries to take him, she whispered. Daniel reached for her hand. He can't, he said. Legally, I'm the father now. But blood, she began. Blood doesn't raise children, I said firmly. Love does. Presence does. Paperwork matters more than fear right now. She looked at me, eyes wide. What should we do? The question wasn't really about strategy. It was about trust. You tell the truth, I said. To the right people. A lawyer. A counselor. And someday to the child on your terms, not his. Lena closed her eyes, tears spilling freely now. I don't want my son to be a weapon. Then don't let fear turn him into one, I replied. Over the next weeks, the letter was handled the way grown problems should be, quietly, deliberately, with support. A lawyer confirmed what Daniel already knew. The past had no legal claim here. Still, the emotional tremor lingered. Lena became watchful again. Not toward me, but toward the world. Toward windows and phones and unknown numbers. One night, after the baby finally fell asleep, she sat beside me on the couch and spoke so softly, I nearly missed it. I almost ruined everything, she said, because I was ashamed. I turned to her. Shame thrives in silence, I said. You broke that pattern. She shook her head. You did. When you stayed. That night, after I went home, I lay awake thinking about how easy it is to confuse morality with punishment. How quickly people decide who deserves grace. And how rarely families survive when no one chooses to be brave first. Spring came early. The baby took his first steps on a bright Saturday morning, wobbling between Daniel and me, Lena clapping from the sidelines. When he fell, he laughed, more amused than hurt, and I felt something in my chest loosen. Later that day, Lena pulled me aside. I want to tell him someday, she said again. Not the whole world. Just him. When he's ready, I agreed. And when that day comes, she added, I want you there. My throat tightened. I'll be wherever he needs me. That evening, after dinner, Daniel cleared his throat. I want to say something, he said, standing awkwardly by the table. Mom, I don't say this enough. But you saved us. I shook my head. No, I said. You saved yourselves. I just didn't walk away. Lena nodded, eyes wet. You could have. Yes, I said. But love isn't proven by leaving. The baby reached for me then, arms outstretched, impatient and trusting. I took him. And in that moment, I understood the quiet power of staying, of holding space when others expect judgment, of choosing patience when outrage would have felt justified. Some secrets come into families like storms. They don't destroy the house if someone knows how to reinforce the foundation. By the time summer arrived, the secret no longer felt like a live wire running through the family. It was still there, real, delicate, deserving of care, but it no longer shocked us when we brushed against it. That was the difference. We had learned how to hold it without bleeding. The baby, my grandson in every way that mattered, had learned to crawl with determination, dragging one knee behind him like he was negotiating terms with gravity. He laughed loudly now, freely. The kind of laugh that fills a room and reminds you why people choose hope even when fear feels safer. Lena watched him one afternoon from the porch, sunlight warming her face. I used to think motherhood was about control, she said quietly. About doing everything perfectly so nothing could go wrong. I sat beside her, the wooden boards warm beneath my palms. Motherhood is about adaptation, I replied. And forgiveness. Mostly for yourself. She nodded. I spent so long afraid you'd reject me that I almost created the very thing I feared. Yes, I said gently. Fear has a way of fulfilling its own prophecies. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that told me we'd crossed the final bridge. I don't feel like I have to hide from you anymore. That night, after I drove home, I stood in my kitchen and looked around, at the familiar walls, the quiet corners, the life I'd built one ordinary day at a time. I realized something then that felt both heavy and freeing. Families aren't broken by truth. They're broken by the absence of compassion when truth finally arrives. The final moment of healing came unexpectedly, the way real closures often do. It happened at the pediatrician's office. The waiting room smelled faintly of disinfectant and crayons. Lena filled out forms while Daniel bounced the baby on his knee. I sat nearby, flipping through a magazine I wasn't reading. The nurse called the baby's name. She hesitated just a second, then looked at Lena and Daniel. "And the father?" she asked. Daniel stood immediately. "That's me." The nurse smiled and nodded, marking her clipboard without question. No pause. No confusion. No correction. Lena's breath caught. It wasn't dramatic. No one else noticed. But I saw her shoulders drop, just slightly. Like she'd finally put down something heavy she'd been carrying too long. Inside the exam room, Lena looked at me and whispered, "I didn't realize how much I needed that." "You deserved it," I said. So did he. On the drive home, Daniel spoke up from the front seat. "When the time comes," he said, "I'll tell him. With Lena. Together." I nodded. That's how truth should be given. Hand in hand. Life continued. Not perfectly, but honestly. There were still moments of insecurity. Days when Lena worried about whispers that hadn't happened yet. Nights when Daniel lay awake, wondering if he'd made the right choices. But there was no more pretending. And pretending, I learned, is what rots families from the inside out. On my grandson's first birthday, we gathered in the backyard under a cheap paper banner that read one in crooked letters. There was cake smeared across his cheeks, balloons bobbing in the summer breeze, laughter spilling from people who had no idea how close this family had come to losing itself. As I watched Lena kneel beside him, wiping frosting from his chin, she glanced up at me. "Thank you," she mouthed. I didn't nod. I didn't smile. I simply placed my hand over my heart. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Lena hugged me tightly. Not stiff. Not cautious. Just human. "I know now," she said into my shoulder, "that you didn't want to hold the baby in the hospital because of ownership." "No," I replied softly. "I wanted to hold him because love reaches forward, even when it's afraid." She pulled back, tears shining but steady. "I'm glad you didn't let me turn love into a boundary." So am I. Because here is the truth I learned, one I didn't expect to learn so late in life. Being right can give you distance. Being kind can give you a future. I could have exposed her. I could have demanded answers. I could have walked away wounded and justified. But then my grandson would have grown up inside a fracture. Instead, he grew up inside a choice. A choice to stay. A choice to listen. A choice to let truth breathe without letting it destroy. And sometimes, that's the bravest thing a family member can do. So I'll leave you with this question, the one that stayed with me long after the hospital lights dimmed and the secret finally surfaced. If you were standing where I stood, hurt, excluded, and holding a truth that could break everything, would you choose to expose or to protect? If this story moved you, consider sharing it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you believe families can survive honesty when it's wrapped in compassion, stay with me because there are more stories like this waiting to be told. Would you have done what I did? Tell me in the comments.